You're listening to the Renegade Blitz Podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz Podcast. I'm your host, Polk, and I'm joined by Guthrie Rasmussen and Chris Ward. Guys, how are we feeling on a victory Monday after a 28-21 Steelers victory?
I was definitely good after that Steelers win, starting off the season 3-0 for the first time since 2010, and they'll have the chance to go 4-0 on Sunday against the 3-0 Titans for the first time since 1979.
Feel exactly the same. Feels good to be 3-0.
Yes, 3-0, but the three opponents for the Steelers are combined 0-9, so this Titans game will be the first winning team the Steelers face in perhaps the first 5 weeks of the season if we think about getting ahead to next week's game with the Philadelphia Eagles. But let's focus on the Titans. Guys, so far with this season, it's like it hasn't exactly been the prettiest at times. Slow starts offensively, but hey, 3-0 is still 3-0, and you can't really complain about that unless you like the Chicago Bears, but that's different.
Yeah, it's the Titans. It's weird because the Titans, their opponents so far have a combined record of 1-8, so it's kind of really hard to know. Like, we both think that the Steelers and Titans are definitely like the premier teams, or one of them in the AFC, but it's kind of hard to get a read on the Steelers. I mean, one thing we know is that the Giants are like abysmal. They're not a good team. Denver has a ton of injuries right now, and Houston, their defense is just they can't create a turnover. They haven't created one all year, and they can't stop the run. So, it really is hard to indicate right now where the Steelers truly stand. But all things considering, they're obviously one of the top teams in the AFC.
Yes, and one of the big things that have led the Steelers to that 3-0 start has been the run defense, again, shutting down the lead back for a team. David Johnson did not really get off to any start whatsoever. It's like, you could say one thing in the past couple of weeks, it was like catching out of the backfield was one thing that running backs could do against the Steelers, but with David Johnson, he was MIA.
David Johnson only had 13 carries for only 23 yards, and the only thing that really saved his day for fantasy owners was that one touchdown. But the Steelers effectively shut him down other than that touchdown. He had 2 receptions for 23 yards, which actually, isn't terrible, but I'm surprised the Texans really didn't give him the ball any more than that. So the Steelers effectively shut him down. That is probably the reason why they won that game, is limiting that run game and containing Deshaun Watson.
Overall, Houston just had 29 yards rushing on 15 carries, an average of 1.9 yards per carry. And that's the second time this year that the Steelers have allowed a team to rush for 29 yards. They did it in week 1 against the Giants.
Yeah, so as it stands right now, the Steelers are obviously the number 1 rushing defense in the league. Only giving up, their best rushing total given up was against Denver, 90 yards between 2 running backs. So regardless, you could say this right now, the pass defense has kind of gone back to what we're kind of used to with the Steelers, where when the pass rush is firing on all cylinders, it doesn't matter who's out there, the Steelers are going to win, or at least have a good defensive day. But of course, that run defense in the 3-4, that's always been notoriously tough for anyone to run against. Really, you could put any team up against a 3-4, and it's just trouble for them. And again, for the Steelers, it's business as usual.
Yeah, the pass defense has kind of been worrisome, in this early portion of the season. But they've been blitzing a lot in the first 2 games. But Watson was a tough test. He's a great quarterback. And what do you think of that touchdown pass he had to Fuller on Nelson? I mean, that was a tough play for Nelson to make. He kind of just put the ball right where it needed to be.
One thing about Steven Nelson, it's just that he was shut down for us last year, and it's just like you have to go with the way that the Steelers' pass defense has been this year. It's like it's been good, it's been bad. But for the most part, it's probably chalked up to teams getting more tape on them. I mean, that's one thing. Of course, there was penalty issues, but really, then when you look at the second half and go, Houston didn't score a point from there on out, so you have to go, can we really complain over a group that's just kind of been caught up with so much tape on them compared to last year?
No, I agree with that. I think they also make up with that in turnovers and getting those sacks just as a defense, because it's really important to get those turnovers, especially against an opponent like Deshaun Watson, who is he's a very good quarterback, probably the best quarterback we faced all year. Well, definitely. So getting those turnovers on him were very important. Or turnover on him was very important.
Yeah, and credit to Tomlin and Keith Butler for making halftime adjustments there. In the first half, Watson was 14 of 18 for 202 yards and had 2 touchdowns. And then the second half, he was 5 and 9 for just 62 yards with an interception. So they really shut him down in the second half, and that was a huge interception Mike Hilton had, and that really swung the momentum in the game after that. Steelers completely took over after that.
Well, I messaged the group chat over at halftime, and I said, yes, we need those adjustments to be made now. And that happened.
And credit to Tomlin and Butler. Butler, a couple years ago, he got a lot of criticism and stuff, but I mean, they did a great job there in the second half.
I think he's still getting flack, honestly. But it's certainly encouraging for the Steelers because this division is still going to run through Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. So with the second half against Watson, it does fare well with guys who, I'd like to say that Watson is a little bit of a hybrid of Mahomes and Jackson in terms that he's a better thrower than Jackson, but he's a better runner than Mahomes, in my opinion. So it's certainly with that hybrid matchup and future matchups against Lamar Jackson, and someone's going to have to go through Pat Mahomes, it's probably going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. So now let's talk a little bit about the offense. Of course, as you can see, the running backs are kind of the big question every day. It's who's going to step up, and James Conner stepped up again for the Steelers.
Yeah, another 100-yard rushing, over 100 yards rushing for James Conner, second consecutive game. And every game this year, the Steelers have a 100-plus-yard rusher.
The common theme here with the Steelers is when Conner is rolling, the Steelers roll. I think every game when Conner gets like over 5 yards per carry, it looks good for the Steelers. I think they just need to get a running back going and to dominate the game.
What did you guys think of McFarland in his first action as a Steeler?
I thought he was really good. What was it, 42 yards rushing on 6 carries? He really added that, a different dimension. He adds that more speed than the other running backs. And like we said last week, I think it's time for McFarland to get touches over Samuels. I mean, Samuels just he just doesn't give you. You saw in that third one run, or was third and short, he couldn't pick up the first down. And I'll have to go look back at the all 22 or whatever. But from what some people were saying is that he should have got that first down.
So ideally, what do you guys think the running back stable should be for the Steelers going forth? I guess we've kind of just demoted Benny Snell to number 2 with Conner's past 2 weeks. So I guess it would be Conner 1, Snell 2, 3, McFarland 4, Samuels, and 5 is the practice squad running back, Wendell Smallwood. Around right, guys?
That sounds good.
Yeah. I believe he's a wide receiver. He's been looking really good in the return game. I mean, you could see why they got rid of Switzer for Macleod.
You see such a good improvement from Macleod. It's just you see him. He makes good reads on when he wants to do a fair catch versus he runs. And when he runs hard and he goes through people, and that's kind of what we've been missing over the years, And I think Switzer's a good player. I just don't think they used him where his strong suits were, or if he was hurt or something. No, I was doing the fair catch.
Yeah, I know.
Is that when I brought out Switzer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Guthrie was waving fair catch before he was answering his question. You could see him in the Zoom call. I don't know if it's like you obviously can't see video because we're doing audio podcast, but that was kind of a funny touch. I just didn't want to. I was just kind of like picturing my head. I'm like, what is he doing? He's waving off. But anyway, we got jokes on the Renegade Blitz podcast. You just can't see them. But another big thing, it's like, that's one thing that I want to cover hopefully in the future with a Renegade Blitz article. We're now in NBA Finals time for the first time in the fall around here. It's just like the Steelers are kind of going into what seems like a whoever offense out there. Whoever can contribute is going to get the ball. And right now it's Connor in the running backs position. And maybe you could see a little bit more from McFarland, but Snell's not going to be too far behind. But speaking of whoever offense, you can go into the receivers and tight ends for the Steelers. This week's leading receiver was Eric Ebron. A nice pass catcher day with 5 catches for 52 yards and 1 touchdown. A beautiful lob to the back corner of the end zone. Guys, we've been waiting for almost a little bit of a game-changing tight end out there, and it seems for now we have 2 really. Vance Mcdonald, we didn't really list him in the rundown there, also had a pretty good game himself, typically bowling people over. It's been about 2 years since his star-making performance against Tampa Bay, knocking out Chris Conti, seemingly from Football Forever, guys.
Yeah, it was a good day for the tight ends this year. And, they're kind of, especially McDonald was quiet the first 2 games. But, that was a beautiful pass there that Ben had to Ebron in the corner of the end zone. And, that's what Steeler fans and the media has been looking for from Ebron. He's that big red zone target, and he definitely had a good game against the Texans. And I'm looking forward to, getting him more the Steelers getting him more touches as the season progresses.
We've seen after game, he's been getting more and more of a role in this offense, and I hope it keeps going. And I do not mind seeing Vance McDonald in there as long as he gets those catches.
You have to have one question at least for now. It's just that with Derek Watt now being out for a couple games for the Steelers, it's who's going to line up in that fullback position. Are they going to potentially move down McDonald into fullback in those I formation sets and maybe bring in a lineman to report as an eligible receiver? Word to Zach Banner out there.
Yeah, for the fullback, you saw McDonald in there. But I don't know if they'll go, find someone in, that's available. Like I saw some people talking about Rosie Nix coming back. Because they don't have like another fullback on their roster, and I don't believe being on the practice squad either. So, and McDonald has to do, when they go their 2 tight end sets. So, I would imagine that they'll probably have to get someone, that's available right now to replace Watt.
Yeah, it hurts having him gone, but hopefully, if they don't get somebody, they can just work some other plays in there or be creative, because that's what we've seen a lot with this offense this year, and it just looks more creative for better and for worse, and hopefully, it'll be better in that case.
Maybe we could see more of the ace 2 tight end sets where we have 2 tight ends out there. So you have Ebron on one side and McDonald on the other, and then they just motion the other tight end to whatever side they want to run into. It's kind of tipping their hat a little bit on defense, but they can also run a little bit of misdirection. Of course, they have another opportunity to get Rosie Nix out there. There's even another fullback out here that I'm a little bit too much for a wrestling nerd here, but Bronson Rechsteiner, he's the son of Scott Steiner. I'm just saying, holla if you hear me. I mean, why not? I mean, just make it happen for me at least.
Who was he with during training camp?
I think he was with Baltimore, but he may actually still be on Baltimore's practice squad. I actually have to go look it up there. I probably shouldn't have said it without finding some information out there, but if he's on the practice squad, just pick him up, Steelers. If he's out there in free agency, why not? Let's let him get a couple reps at fullback before he decides to follow his father and Hall of Fame uncle into the ring, just for me.
Who would have thought we would have got a Scott Steiner reference on the Renegade Blitz?
Anything that I could think of in my brain, I'm just going to say. You should know that by now.
What was you saying again? Was it a Big Papa Pump or something?
Big Papa Pump.
Yeah. But I digress. Get back to the Steelers and stuff so we don't lose people with our wrestling references.
And even with Ebron taking over the stat sheet this week and the injury with Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster really has been one of the more steady wide receivers for the Steelers this year. He had another touchdown, another nice game, even though it wasn't much on the stat sheet. He's on his way back. He's on pace for double-digit touchdown receptions and 90 receptions on the year. It's certainly a bounce-back season for Juju. Guys, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't understand all the hate he gets. He's a very consistent player, and he's only had 2 fumbles in his career. It just happens at the least opportune times. I think we've talked about that. I think in all the work he's put in the offseason, I think it's starting to show as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, he's already matched his touchdown total of last year with 3, which just shows the quarterback situation the Steelers were dealing with last year. And he's been making great plays, blocking well. He had a great block on that James Conner 12-yard game-winning touchdown run. So I agree. I think Juju's been unbelievable so far through these first 3 games.
But getting back onto, let's talk a little bit about the offensive line. Only gave up 2 sacks for 19 yards, so another great pass blocking day for the Steelers. Of course, the run blocking, again, another 100-yard rusher. Guys, let's talk about how Chuck Okorafor shut down J.J. Watt. No sacks, no quarterback hits, and if you want to go to the rest of the linebacker position for the Texans, Whitney Merciless and Zach Cunningham. No sacks, no quarterback hits. Really, the 2 sacks came from linemen. So, all in all, you have to say that the Steelers' offensive line right now is balling.
That was huge to be able to shut down J.J. Watt, a big-time player, Defensive Player of the Year winner. And it was so great to see Chuck Okorafor shut him down. And the offensive line has really come together, and it was nice having DeCastro back, just having all those guys together, that and not allowing those linemen you mentioned to get any sacks. That's huge.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Ty, just no sacks, quarterback hits or tackles for a loss for J.J. Watt. I mean, that's an unbelievable performance for Okorafor. 4 total tackles, but just 1 solo for J.J. Watt. I think Okorafor has a really promising future with the Steelers at, either right tackle or left tackle, depending on what happens with Villanueva.
Yeah, there's going to be a ton of decisions that the Steelers can make on the offensive line. Zach Banner should be there in the future. It's just like, I don't know if there's enough tape from what he did against the Giants, but it seemed promising with him as well. And plus, him being a fan favorite, he'll certainly be back in the Steelers uniform next year with something to prove. So it's going to be fun to see next year, hopefully with a full preseason, who's going to step up and take the offensive line positions.
Yeah, with this offensive line, they've had such a small sample size, just with the COVID-19 situation going on. So it's nice seeing how well they've come together and how they've grown as a unit together, despite having that extra experience together.
But of course, one thing to talk about is the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger. Big Ben had another impressive day today. 23 completions on 36 attempts for 237 yards and 2 touchdowns, and more importantly, no picks, leading the team to his 44th game-winning drive and 32nd fourth-quarter comeback, guys. But there was another thing that we wanted to talk about that happened a little earlier in the game. Guthrie, that dive that he made to get the first down, you were a little nervous there, weren't you?
Yeah, we're always worrying about his elbow. I think now it's time. We just got to have trust in him that all the work he put into the offseason made sure that he was ready for that kind of contact. But what was really crazy is that the refs ruled that not a first down. I think it just goes to show that Tomlin is cursed on his challenges.
Yeah, I mean that was a perfectly fine challenge there by Tomlin. I thought Ben got the first down, and it was just a bad spot, I think, by the officials.
That's just the way the game goes. Juju manages to stumble but fall into a first down, and Ben just couldn't get the luck there. That's just how it is in the NFL sometimes. it's a game of inches, and in the words of Tony D'Amato from Any Given Sunday, you fight for that inch, and that's just how it is.
I mean, so far I think Ben's playing really well. He's if you listen to his post game interviews, he's really hard on himself and everything. But so far he's completing 67% of his passes for 777 yards, 7 TDs, and only 1 interception. So I mean, all is good so far with Ben here, and first 3 games coming off elbow surgery.
It's kind of
like how he's getting all his receivers involved. He had 7 different completions, or at least 7 different receivers had a completion. I think that's good to have receivers, available.
Well, we've been facing a lot of teams that have had 4 wide receivers on the stat sheet, 2 tight ends as well on the stat sheet. It's the ever-changing offensive evolution in the NFL, but another thing Ben said there, he had the quote, "If I play good, I'll let you know." And when you compare it to last year, anything that puts points on the scoreboard is fine by me, Ben. So I'll tell you for you. You've had good games.
And the big difference you see is they're able to run those like RPOs, like run pass options. They couldn't do that last year with Hodges and Rudolph. And they did that really well against Houston. You saw it there at the end of the game where they had like a jumbo set, strong side to the right with their tight ends. They had Claypool far out on the left, and he's quick pass to Claypool, and he broke a tackle, and that was the game right there.
Really, guys, I want to ask you this question: what was the play offensively that you think changed the game for the Steelers?
It probably have to be in the fourth quarter there after that Mike Hilton interception. Connor started to really get going. The offensive line started to impose their will on the Texans' run defense. I think that was the key drive. On that drive, Ebron had a big 17-yard catch too, which really kickstarted the drive. So I think that drive following the Hilton, because they just dominated that fourth quarter. Or after Hilton's interception in the early portion of the quarter.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Just after that second half adjustment, how the defense came together, and that Mike Hilton interception specifically, that really kind of changed the game.
Has there been any early reports on Deontay Johnson? He left the game with a concussion, but he quickly tweeted after the game that he's fine. So we're recording this on Monday, so we will see as the week comes through if that injury affected Johnson in any way.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything other than that tweet saying that he's good.
Yeah, we'll see kind of how it works on the injury report. If he's saying that, maybe he'll play, but he's not a doctor, and it just depends how the protocol works for in his favor or out of his favor.
Absolutely, and we talked a little bit earlier about Ray Macleod, who's starting to shine on special teams, but we didn't talk about the kicker. Chris Boswell, so far, perfect on the season. I hope we didn't jinx him with that. But guys, certainly 2 years ago, Boz was a little bit of a problem. Since then, it just seems like that was just a blip on the radar for him. Whatever was ailing him at that time, he's back to being a Pro Bowl kicker. And really, with the Steelers' offense, it's just that eventually they're going to get into the end zone. It's important that if they call on their kicker, he can go out there and make those field goals for them.
Yeah, like you said last year or 2 years ago, Boz his future with the Steelers was certainly in doubt. But ever since, he's really got together, and he's automatic. Pretty much now. Whenever he goes out for a kick, you're not you're not nervous about it.
I still get a little nervous every time. I get a little nervous after that year, but it's still encouraging to see how he's bounced back. And I feel like it's kind of inappropriate to talk about that, but it's still so nice to see him just being automatic, as you said.
And now we'll switch sides to the defense a little bit. We did talk about it earlier, but we'll go more in depth with it. The defensive line, it's kind of been a little bit of a quiet, you could say, season for Stephon Tuitt, in between the always brilliant Cam Hayward and then the emergence of Tyson Alualu. yesterday, Stephon Tuitt really reminded people that, hey, I could do some things out here too.
Yeah, he was quiet in the first two games, and even in the early portion of the game, you saw people on Twitter saying, like, where's Tuitt? But he really came to life, as the game progressed, and he recorded 4 total tackles, a sack, tackle for loss, and 3 quarterback hits. So yeah, Tuitt had an amazing game against Houston.
So nice to have him back.
He never really left, Guthrie. It's just that in between the two guys there, it's just there's so much you can talk about, but it's just like I always give 3-4 linemen the benefit of the doubt because it's like they're there to plug holes. It's really the linebackers that make the money in terms of getting sacks, QB pressures, which of course, as we know with the Steelers, that's their MO.
Yeah, and I know he's never left. I was just talking about the injury.
Oh, yes, of course, the injury last year. It is good to see him back now that you made me think of that because you see the pressure, and it's like the Steelers have always been great at getting pressure to the quarterback, but man, this year it really seems like there's been a jump in their step.
Yeah, I believe 5 sacks and 12 quarterback hits. After last week where they had 19 quarterback hits and 7 sacks. So yeah, this pass rush is unbelievable. And you forget about or Tua might be quiet or whatever, but that in the first 2 games. But that's only because there's so many other good players like Hayward and Bud and Watt, and Alu has been playing really good.
And when we talk about the linebacker play for the Steelers, there's a lot to talk about. Of course, you can talk about with Watt and Dupree, but Devin Bush made a couple nice plays as well. Notably, one play in which he defended against Darren Fells, who, for those who don't know, Fells is not a natural football player. He didn't play it in college. He played basketball at UC Irvine, so he's another one of those tight ends that came over from basketball. You hear about it from Antonio Gates and Tony Gonzalez, but certainly Fells is a guy to watch out there. And Chris, just talk about that play a little bit.
Yeah, it was an amazing play. Bush made a great play on the ball there and really just ripped it out of Fells' hands. And, Houston ultimately scored on the drive, but I think that made Steeler fans feel better after last week where Fant kind of had his way with Bush in some instances.
One of the things that people haven't exactly been pleased with this season was the secondary so far. I mean, they've come up with big plays when the time came for it, but it's just like, sometimes the Steelers couldn't get off the field or anything like that. But for the most part, it was aside from, touchdowns early to Watson, again, 5 for 9 and after the second half. So guys, let's focus a little bit on the secondary so far. We could talk about the guy that made the big play for the Steelers, Mike Hilton. He led the team in tackles with 7 and also had a pick.
Yeah, like you said, it's kind of been up and down for the secondary. Like Mike Hilton gave up a touchdown early in the game against Randall Cobb, but obviously made up for it there at the end when he had that game-changing interception. But it just Steven, like we mentioned earlier, Steven Nelson giving up that touchdown. It was a real tough play to make. Watson put that ball right where it needed to be for Fuller. Minka, I think teams are not targeting him a lot early. He seems like he's been really quiet, but I don't think he's necessarily, playing bad. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if teams are trying to figure him out or what. I just don't think having no tackles as a safety, as long as you're not missing any tackles, I don't think that's a bad thing. That just means that, that part of the field's kind of shut down, like quarterbacks are thinking about you. I think having him there is important. Because if he was a liability, teams might exploit that. I don't think he's been a liability other than a penalty here or there, but I think he's cleaned that up last few weeks.
I know Pro Football Focus has a low grade for him so far, but take that for what it's worth, really. As far as to me, he hasn't stood out like you mentioned, like where he's missing, a large amount of tackles or looking bad or giving up big touchdown passes or anything like
I think that's just like he's typically the single high man. So basically he's the center fielder out there, and you have to remember, even in baseball sometimes it's like there's a left fielder and there's a right fielder, and the Steelers had to like really highlight a couple of those guys, Joe Hayden and Steve Nelson being, I guess, de facto left and right fielders depending on where they lined up. So it's just sometimes the ball doesn't come to you, and with with Minka Fitzpatrick's reputation that he built last year, really being the savior of that Steelers defense, I think part of it's just that the ball just hasn't been there for him, and another thing is that people are still afraid. Okay, what if I give him that opportunity to make him a play? Then what happens?
Yeah, some of his interceptions last year, he was just in the right place at the right time, and that's not a knock on him or anything. It just turnovers are weird like that. Sometimes they come in bunches, and sometimes you go through a period where you don't get any. So I'm not worried about Minka. He's still an unbelievable player.
I think the turnovers will come. I don't think Steelers fans have to be worried at all.
There's a reason why I think Steelers fans and maybe some Dolphins fans ancillary from the trade are expecting him to basically be Night Train Lane, who, if you know, as a rookie, has not only the rookie record for interceptions by a player, but the interception record period with 14. And some of that's probably, if you take a look at it, one, he used to kill people out there, basically. Two, he was in the right place at the right time. So it's just that the season's young. Who knows? Maybe the ball will come to Minka, and he'll certainly make a play like he did against Indianapolis last year. It's just that time will tell. And overall, with the Steelers' defense, it's just that last year they were expected to go out there and win the game for us. It's different this year. The offense can go pull their weight. And sometimes with that, it gives you comfort. It's like, I know that people were probably thinking, wow, if the offense can not kill us anymore, maybe it'll give the defense more free reign to go out there and go hunting for the ball just like they did last year. You'd think that if the Steelers could have that mentality for the ball like they did with lesser offensive power, why not go attack with the same mindset?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Maybe last year they just thought they had to be more aggressive. Maybe it's just how the ball fell, like different, chance wise. That's a good thing to bring up.
And Ty, how about we credit Tomlin for making those halftime adjustments, but also the team discipline was much better against Houston as they were penalized just 2 times for 14 yards after last week where they had 10 penalties for 89 yards against Denver. And Tomlin said last week that they brought in the officials to help clean up in that area, and it certainly paid off.
And I believe one of those penalties, we were talking about RPOs a little earlier. One of those penalties was just a ineligible receiver downfield on Villanueva, which happens on RPOs. It's just that's the nature of the play. It's just like it's bang, bang. And sometimes I believe Villanueva was just leaning over into the 2-yard position, and that just happens sometimes. It's like some referees might just go like, his feet's still at 1 yard, so we'll let it go. Other guys are just going to look for that, and there's nothing you could do. It's just that you go, whatever, and keep on playing.
Well, what do you think about the Watt ball? It was obviously a big story coming to the game. Kind of was probably, do you think it was built up a little bit too much? I mean, obviously it's a great story, but I mean, we heard so much about it.
Yeah,
we definitely heard a lot about it.
It was built so much.
We both are thinking the same thing.
Sorry about that. I cut you off, Guthrie. You can say that. I guess.
You were honest about to say the same thing I was. I think we both were just going to say that, it was talked about all week, and it's like these guys all play different positions, and it's like even if Derek Watt was into the fullback position, it's like you never, we're not going to see that collision I think everybody's looking for.
Yeah,
I don't know the brothers,
I would, the chances of a fullback, making a clear block on a defensive line is, pretty rare. But credit to them and their family. They're unbelievable in all what they do on and off the field. But it was just they talked about it a lot all throughout the media outlets, and understandably so. But I think even the Watt brothers probably got a little tired about hearing about it too, with all the media pressure.
How many tweets did you see from Pittsburgh media personalities, both big and small, saying, okay, let's get it out of the way? JJ, TJ, Derek, they're brothers.
Yeah. It kind of turned on to like a joke and stuff like, hey, these guys are brothers. Haven't you heard?
Yes, it was. And also to keep stats at home, it's the second time since 1932 that three brothers were playing football at the same time for two different teams. The first time it happened, you have to go back to last year with the Edmonds brothers between Buffalo and Pittsburgh last year with Terrell, Trey, and Tremaine Edwards for the Bills. And we quickly forgot about that. And if you guys remember, I don't even think there was barely a soul that spoke about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was brought up, but I mean, obviously not to the degree with the Watt brothers, and that has to go with their statuses as far as like definitely J.J. Watt and T.J. Watt. They're both premier players in the league.
Yeah, certainly. We hope that Terrell Edmonds comes up to become a great, strong safety, maybe even a defensive player of the year nominee winner. Hopefully, because certainly his brother Tremaine out in Buffalo is doing all he can to get that DPOY. So, who knows? Maybe in the future we could say that the Steelers had, at one point on their field, 4 Defensive Player of the Year award winners and 2 decent running backs. But of course, it's tough. It's tough because Trey was kind of like just brought off the practice squad, I believe, last year. And Derek's a fullback, and you know how it is with fullbacks in this league.
Who knows? Maybe, depending on if Trey Edmonds gets promoted up to the 53-man roster, maybe there'll be another, because the Steelers played Buffalo later in the year, so maybe there'll be another three brothers all playing in the same game.
Is Trey even on the practice squad? That's the question.
Yeah, he's currently on the practice squad.
Well, that's nice. That's nice to know. It really is. So we're gonna hear this for the third time in about 12 months, guys. So get ready.
Yeah, if there's a circumstance where Trey Edmonds gets promoted,
who knows? We might even see it in the playoffs.
Yeah,
and then we'll never hear the end of it, because certainly that's never happened in the playoffs. We'll hope that one of Houston or Buffalo can accommodate us with that. Hopefully in Heinz Field again. Take that, Philadelphia. We're the real city of brotherly love. Let's move on a little bit. The next opponent, of course, is the Titans. We're going to have another preview episode here on the Renegade Blitz. And Guthrie, the Titans they started off 3-0 as well. So 2 undefeated teams enter, 1 undefeated team leaves. So what have you seen about the Titans that's going to make you excited for this matchup?
Oh man, just to see how we handle Derrick Henry. Because he's been unreal. He'll get a lot of carries. That's just what will dictate the game is if we can slow him down and put pressure on Ryan Tannehill. Because, man, it's going to be tough. But I think we can do it.
Yeah, that's going to be obviously the big key there is stopping Derrick Henry. He's an unbelievable running back. And, they're going to get him his touches. And the Steelers are going to have to tackle real well because Henry's a big running back.
Man, it's another great chance to see the Titans. I mean, it's one of those teams that even as a kid, like you remember with their running backs there. You have Eddie George, Lendale White, CJ2K, Chris Johnson. They've always had a great stable of running backs right now, and to see them in the AFC Championship last year was certainly great memories of a kid seeing those guys come through.
Late 90s and early 2000, the Titans and Jaguars always gave the Steelers tough games. And as Todd, you probably remember the playoff game where the Steelers lost when who was that? Nedney. He kind of faked that like he got hit, and he got another chance to kick the field goal, and they won the playoff game.
Was that in the early 2000s with Tommy Maddox at quarterback? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was 2002 divisional round game.
Man, I was in a bar when I shouldn't have been, and I remember watching that. And it's just that it's one of those things. It's just like, man, I hate the Titans, but I love them too because they bring back old school football, and in Pittsburgh we're all about that smash mouth stuff, even though we're not really suited for it anymore. So anytime you see Steelers and Titans on the docket, it's going to be a hard fought game. And of course, the last time the Steelers faced the Titans, I believe it was with Marcus Mariota at quarterback at Heinz Field on a Thursday night, and that was a very fun game.
Yeah, the Steelers. Well, I believe they won 40-17. They blew them out. Now it's under Ryan Tannehill now in Tennessee, and he's played pretty well there, especially last year and the early portion of this year.
Yeah, and of course Tannehill is one of those guys that again with Tennessee's old school offense, they use run to set up play action, and they use bootlegs, and Tannehill can run too. So it's going to be another running quarterback for the Steelers defense. Granted, probably not on the level of a guy like Deshaun Watson, but certainly still a guy that the Steelers have to look out for. Guthrie, even though we don't have you on the preview episodes, so I wanted to add in a little bit of a new wrinkle to the podcast. What's your prediction for the game?
Oh, man.
Early
go Steelers 28-17.
Really, the magic number for the Steelers has been around that 21 mark. Chris has been living and dying on that for Steelers opponents. So
I got the point differential of the win right with 7 points, but I was off a little bit. I had 24-17 the Steelers beating the Texans, but obviously it ended up being 28-21. It's too early in the week right now for prediction. I have to look at it more. Look at the Titans deep. I did watch their highlights against the Vikings, and I saw Clowney there doing some good things there for the Titans.
Yes, that's another guy that it seems that between Chuck Okorafor and Alejandro Villanueva, they're going to have to see if they can shut down. Okorafor was up to the task with Watt. Clowney, Watt's old partner in the linebacker spot in Houston, it's certainly going to be another challenge for Okorafor. So I'm excited to see if he can go 3 for 3 with his assignments.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, the Titans offensive line will definitely be the toughest test this year for the Steelers pass rush.
Yeah, they got guys like Taylor Lewan out there. It's certainly going to be fun to see that. The Steelers have kind of had their pickings against offensive lines that, while serviceable, certainly no match for Bud Dupree and TJ Watt. So now with a true offensive line in front of them, it's going to be an exciting matchup for us. Guthrie, you have anything more to add?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough matchup. We'll just have to see what happens. I just think we just got to be firing at all cylinders this game, especially if King Henry gets going, because if he gets going, we might be in trouble.
And the Steelers, they'll be on the road. They'll be in Nashville for this game. Their first road game since week 1. But, they're going to have fans in the crowd there in Nashville. But, it's kind of tough this year with, is their home field advantage, with a limited amount of fans. They'll be traveling, so, they won't be sleeping in, their own beds. So maybe that has some of effect or whatever. But it should be a great game on Sunday.
Yes, indeed. The Steelers will be facing the Titans in aptly named Nissan Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee. This week, we're going to have Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, on the preview podcast for Steelers versus Titans later in the week. For now, that's all for us at the Renegade Blitz. For Guthrie Rasmussen and Chris Ward, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz. Read articles on renegadeblitz.com and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on YouTube.